My name is Robert Harrison. I am 62 years old, and for 3 decades I built a respected financial consulting firm in Phoenix, Arizona. Every dollar I earned came from calculated decisions and hard work. My first marriage ended amicably after 28 years. Karen and I divided everything fairly and moved on. 3 years later, I met Amanda at a charity gala. She was 39 years old, had flawless blonde hair, and a radiant smile. We talked about art and travel. It seemed perfect. It seemed real. In the first 6 months of relationship, Amanda was everything a man could wish for. She organized sophisticated dinners at my house in Paradise Valley, a 5,000 square foot property valued at $2,800,000. She accompanied my business trips to New York and San Francisco without complaining. She showed genuine interest when I explained complex investment concepts during our morning walks through the desert. I married her in an intimate ceremony in Sedona, surrounded by red rock formations and infinite blue sky. It was in October when the Arizona heat finally gave a respite. My 2 children from the first marriage, Michael and Jennifer, both in their 30s, were polite but reserved. Michael pulled me aside before the ceremony and said only this: "Dad, you barely know this woman." I smiled and replied that at 58 years old, I knew exactly what I was doing. How wrong I was. The first signs appeared subtly. Amanda started suggesting that I sell my country house in Flagstaff, a mountain property that I had bought for $400,000 15 years earlier, and was now easily worth $900,000. She said it was too isolated, too cold in the winter, too far from everything. When I mentioned that that house represented my personal refuge, where I went to fish and simply exist in silence, she changed the subject quickly. Then came the pressure to put her name on the deed of the main house. She argued that, as a wife, she deserved security. I consulted my lawyer, Thomas Chen, who for 20 years had taken care of all my legal matters. Thomas was direct. "Robert, you have been married for only 8 months. There is no rush. Protect your assets." I followed his advice. Amanda did not like it. The temperature at home changed imperceptibly, like when a cloud covers the sun in the desert, and suddenly you realize the cold that was always there, hidden under the heat. It was Jennifer who first verbalized her suspicions. She showed up at home on a Thursday afternoon when Amanda was at a spa with friends. We sat on the covered patio, drinking iced tea while we watched the hummingbirds competing for the feeders that I maintained. "Dad," Jennifer started with that careful tone she used since childhood when she needed to say something difficult, "did you check Amanda's background?" I asked what she meant. My daughter pulled out her phone and showed me a series of articles she had found. Amanda had been married 3 times before. The first husband was an insurance executive in Seattle, the second a plastic surgeon in Los Angeles, the third a real estate developer in San Diego. Each divorce had resulted in substantial financial settlements. Each marriage had lasted between 18 months and 3 years. The pattern was undeniable. I felt as if someone had poured ice water over my head. Jennifer took my hand and said, "Dad, she is a professional. You need to protect yourself." That night, after Amanda returned from the spa radiant and relaxed, pretending interest in my plans for the weekend, I started paying attention for real. I observed how she checked her phone obsessively, how she left to answer certain calls, how she asked casually about my investments, my properties, my retirement plans. In Arizona, we have community property laws that can divide assets acquired during the marriage, but my main assets were all earned before meeting her. Still, she could claim a significant percentage depending on how things were structured. I decided to document everything. I started recording our conversations, something perfectly legal in Arizona, since our state allows recording with consent of only one party. I was that party. I carried a small digital recorder in my pocket for 3 months, capturing every discussion about money, every suggestion about properties, every revealing comment. The true nature of Amanda revealed itself completely on a March afternoon. I was in the home office, supposedly on a video conference with East Coast investors, but actually just watching through the security cameras that I had discreetly installed. Amanda was in the living room on the phone, and her voice carried an animation that she never showed with me. She said, "Do not worry, Rick. Everything is going according to plan. He has 3 main properties, the house here in Paradise Valley, the mountain one in Flagstaff, and that bungalow in Scottsdale that he rents. Together, they are easily worth $4 million. The recorder in my pocket captured every word when later I confronted the situation indirectly. She did not know that I had installed cameras. She did not know that I was systematically documenting her financial betrayal. Rick, I discovered later, was Richard Castellano, a divorce lawyer known for aggressive tactics and questionable reputation. He had represented Amanda in at least 2 of her previous divorces. I decided to act first. I consulted Thomas Chen and presented all the evidence I had collected. Thomas listened to the recordings, reviewed the documents, and nodded slowly. He said, "Robert, you built a solid case. We will need to act quickly, but strategically. Protect your accounts immediately, document every transaction, and get ready, because when she realizes that you know, things are going to get ugly." He was absolutely right. I transferred funds to protected accounts, documented every asset, and then, on an April morning when the sky was that impossible blue that only exists in the desert, I served Amanda with the divorce papers. Her reaction was theatrical. Tears, accusations, dramatic declarations about how I was destroying our marriage. But her eyes were calculating, measuring, already planning the next move. She called Rick Castellano before I even left the house. The following weeks were a master class in legal manipulation. Rick Castellano presented a petition demanding not only a division of assets, but compensation for emotional contributions to the marriage, psychological suffering caused by the sudden divorce, and damages to her professional reputation. Apparently, Amanda had presented herself as an event consultant during our marriage, although I had never seen her work a single day. The petition demanded the Paradise Valley house, the Flagstaff property, and the Scottsdale bungalow. 3 houses, $4 million in assets, for 18 months of marriage. Thomas read the document in his office in downtown Phoenix, surrounded by shelves of law books and diplomas on the walls, and let out a short and bitter laugh. He said, "They are betting that you will cave and make a deal to avoid the public humiliation of a trial. It is Castellano's standard tactic, but we have something they do not know we have." The hearing date was set for a Tuesday in June. The Maricopa County Courthouse was an imposing building of concrete and glass, with the type of industrial air conditioning that turned the infernal Phoenix heat into an almost uncomfortable cold. I arrived early, wearing my gray Hugo Boss suit, navy blue tie, and the confidence that comes from knowing that you prepared every detail meticulously. Thomas was by my side, carrying a leather briefcase that contained not only legal documents, but also the small digital recorder and complete transcripts of 3 months of conversations. Amanda arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a conservative black dress, tasteful fake pearls, and an expression of a wronged widow that she clearly had practiced. Rick Castellano was exactly as I imagined. 50-something years old, gray hair slicked back, suit too expensive, and a smile that never reached his eyes. They sat on the other side of the aisle, and I could see Amanda watching me, trying to measure my reaction, looking for signs of weakness. The judge was Martha Brennan, a 60-year-old woman known for her sharp intelligence and absolute intolerance for legal manipulation. She had spent 20 years as a defense attorney before being appointed to the court, and had a reputation for seeing through any performance. When she entered, everyone stood up. The bailiff announced the case. Harrison versus Harrison, petition for divorce and division of assets. Judge Brennan adjusted her glasses, flipped through the documents quickly, and looked at both sides. She said, "This is a preliminary hearing to evaluate the property division claims. Mr. Castellano, I understand that your client is seeking substantial compensation. Please, present your argument." Rick Castellano stood up, adjusted his suit, and began what could only be described as a theater play. "Your Honor," Castellano began with that baritone voice that he probably practiced to impress juries, "my client, Amanda Harrison, dedicated 2 years of her life to this marriage. She left her promising career in event consulting to support the business ambitions of Mr. Harrison. She reorganized her whole life, moved from Los Angeles to Phoenix, and invested considerable emotional and professional energy in building a home, a life, a shared future. And now, suddenly and without prior notice, she finds herself discarded, abandoned, forced to rebuild from scratch while Mr. Harrison keeps all the assets they built together." Every word was carefully chosen to create a victim narrative. He continued, "My client is not asking for charity, Your Honor. She is asking for justice, an equitable compensation for the time, energy, and opportunities she sacrificed. We are requesting the transfer of 3 properties, the main residence in Paradise Valley, the mountain house in Flagstaff, and the investment bungalow in Scottsdale, as fair compensation for her contributions to this marriage." The courtroom was silent. Judge Brennan made some notes without expressing emotion. I watched Amanda, who had lowered her head in a gesture of performative humility, touching a handkerchief to her eyes even without visible tears. It was impressive, really. If I did not know the truth, even I might have felt pity. The judge finally looked at Thomas and said, "Mr. Chen, would your client like to respond to these allegations?" Thomas stood up slowly, and I could see the slightest trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth. He said, "Your Honor, we would like to present evidence that completely contradicts the narrative presented by the other party." Castellano interrupted immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a preliminary hearing, not a full trial. The presentation of evidence at this moment is irregular." Judge Brennan looked at him with an expression that could freeze lava. She said, "Mr. Castellano, you just spent 15 minutes presenting unproven allegations about your client's life and contributions. If the defense has relevant evidence, I will hear it. Continue, Mr. Chen." Thomas walked to the center of the room with the confidence of a man who knows exactly where every piece will fall. He said, "Your Honor, my client is a 62-year-old man who spent 30 years building a reputable company through honest work. He was married previously for 28 years, a marriage that ended amicably with a fair division of assets. 3 years later, he met Mrs. Harrison, then Amanda Sutherland, at a charity gala. What he did not know at the time, and what we discovered through subsequent investigation, is that Mrs. Harrison had a well-established pattern. Thomas paused for effect, then continued. She was married 3 times previously. Each marriage lasted between 18 months and 3 years. Each divorce resulted in substantial financial settlements that transferred significant properties and assets to Mrs. Harrison. She is, in simple terms, a professional fortune hunter. Castellano exploded. Objection. This is defamatory and completely irrelevant to this case. Judge Brennan raised her hand. She said, "Mr. Castellano, if this is a documented pattern, it is absolutely relevant to determine your client's intentions when entering this marriage." "Mr. Chen, do you have documentation of these previous marriages?" Thomas opened the briefcase and distributed copies to the judge and the opposing table. They were public marriage and divorce records, financial documents from previous settlements, all obtained legally through public record search. Amanda's expression changed subtly. The wronged widow face began to crack, revealing something harder underneath. Judge Brennan reviewed the documents in silence for several minutes. The only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional turning of pages. Finally, she looked at Amanda and said, "Mrs. Harrison, these documents show that you received a property valued at $1,200,000 from your second husband and a cash settlement of $850,000 from the third." "Is this correct?" Amanda replied with a tense voice. "Those were legitimate settlements, Your Honor. Each of those marriages was real, and I deserved the compensation I received." The judge nodded slowly. "I understand. But it establishes an interesting pattern, does it not?" It was then that Castellano decided to play his main card. He stood up abruptly and said, "Your Honor, with all due respect to the court, my client's history is irrelevant. What matters is what happened in this specific marriage. And the truth is that Mr. Harrison conducted this relationship in bad faith from the beginning. He never had the intention of building a true partnership. He kept all his assets separate, refused to include my client in important financial decisions, and essentially treated her like a maid instead of a wife. Furthermore, we discovered that he began transferring assets to hidden accounts months before filing for divorce, in a clear attempt to defraud my client of her legitimate share of the marital property. This, Your Honor, is not only unfair, it is potentially criminal. We are prepared to file a complaint with the district attorney if necessary." The room went absolutely silent. It was a veiled threat, an attempt to intimidate me into accepting the deal. It was also a complete lie. All my asset transfers were legitimate and made with complete transparency through my accountant, specifically to protect assets that I owned before the marriage. Thomas did not even seem disturbed. He simply looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, these allegations are completely false and demonstrate exactly the type of intimidating tactic for which Mr. Castellano is known. But, more importantly, they bring us to the central point of this case. My client did not act in bad faith. My client did not hide assets. My client simply had the foresight to document the true nature of this marriage and Mrs. Harrison's true intentions." Judge Brennan leaned forward, interested. She asked, "Mr. Chen, what exactly are you suggesting?" Thomas removed the small digital recorder from the briefcase. He said, "Your Honor, in Arizona, we have one-party consent laws for recordings. My client, foreseeing exactly this type of situation, documented his conversations with Mrs. Harrison over 3 months. These recordings reveal not only her true intentions, but also evidence a conspiracy between Mrs. Harrison and her lawyer to extort my client. I would like to present these recordings as evidence." Castellano went pale. Amanda froze completely. The judge looked at the recorder, then at Castellano, then back at Thomas. She said, "Mr. Chen, this is a very serious accusation. You are claiming conspiracy and extortion." Thomas nodded. "I am, Your Honor, and I have audio evidence that proves every word." The judge thought for a moment, then said, "Very well. Let us hear these recordings. Mr. Castellano, would you like to object?" Castellano was clearly trying to calculate his options. If he objected too vehemently, it would look like he was trying to hide something. If he let the recordings be played, the game was over. He chose a middle ground, Your Honor. Without having had the opportunity to review these alleged recordings, I cannot verify their authenticity or appropriate context. I request a postponement so that we can properly examine this material." Judge Brennan looked at him with that expression of someone who has seen this movie many times. She said, "Mr. Castellano, you just made serious allegations of fraud and criminal conduct against Mr. Harrison without presenting a single piece of evidence. I will allow the defense to present its evidence now, and then you will have the opportunity to respond. Play the recordings, Mr. Chen." Thomas connected the recorder to a small speaker that he had brought exactly for this purpose. The sound filled the courtroom with crystal clarity. The first recording was of a conversation that happened in our living room, 3 weeks before I filed for divorce. It was Amanda's voice, unmistakable and full of an animation she rarely showed with me. She was saying, "Rick, you are not understanding. He has 3 properties that are worth at least $4 million in total. If we play it right, we can claim all 3. The Arizona law is favorable. We just need to build the right narrative, show that I contributed significantly to the marriage, that I sacrificed my career." The voice of Rick Castellano responded through the speakerphone, "I understand, Amanda, but we need to be strategic. We cannot seem greedy. Let us ask for the 3 houses, but be prepared to accept 2 plus a cash compensation. The important thing is to make him look like the villain. If we can pressure him publicly, threaten with accusations of fraud or emotional abuse, he will likely cave just to end it quickly. Rich men like him hate public scandals." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the bailiff had stopped taking notes and was looking at Amanda with an expression of shock. The recording continued. Amanda's voice, now more calculating, and if he has protected the assets before. Rick replied, "Then we accuse him of marital fraud. Even if it is not true, the mere accusation will ruin his reputation. He has a financial consulting firm, right? Clients do not like working with people accused of hiding assets from their wives. He will pay to make this go away. Believe me, I have used this tactic before. It works 80% of the time." Amanda laughed, a sharp and unpleasant sound that I had never heard during our marriage. She said, "That is why I pay you, Rick. You are the best. After this one, I will finally be able to buy that house in Laguna Beach that I want. You will still receive your 30%. Do not worry." Thomas turned off the recorder. Judge Brennan was looking at Amanda and Rick Castellano with an expression that mixed disbelief and controlled anger. She said, and her voice was icy, "Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Castellano, would you like to explain what we just heard?" Amanda tried to regain her composure. She said, with a trembling voice, "This was taken completely out of context, Your Honor. That conversation was just a fantasy, an emotional outburst. I was upset. I was processing my feelings about the marriage. It meant nothing. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Harrison, in the recording, you and your lawyer explicitly discuss strategies to extort your husband using false threats. That is not an emotional outburst. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. And you, Mr. Castellano, are you a member of the Arizona Bar Association? Castellano was visibly sweating. He said, Your Honor, this recording may have been edited or manipulated. Without proper forensic analysis, we cannot assume its authenticity. Thomas interrupted calmly. We have the original recording and 3 certified copies, all with digital timestamps that prove there was no editing. I also have a forensic audio expert ready to testify about the authenticity if necessary. Furthermore, I have 6 other similar recordings, all documenting conversations between Mrs. Harrison and Mr. Castellano over 2 months, all discussing strategies to extort my client. Judge Brennan closed the folder in front of her with a dry sound that echoed through the room. She said, Mr. Castellano, I'm going to give you an opportunity to withdraw from this case immediately and cooperate with a Bar Association investigation. Otherwise, I will personally forward this material to the disciplinary committee and recommend that criminal charges be considered. You have 10 seconds to decide. Castellano looked at Amanda, who was now openly crying, but not with the calculated performance from before. These were tears of real panic. He said quickly, Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw as Mrs. Harrison's counsel at this time. The judge nodded. Granted. Get out of my courtroom now, and consider yourself seriously lucky if this does not result in suspension of your license. Castellano grabbed his briefcase and left quickly without looking at Amanda even once. The betrayal was complete. He had abandoned her the moment things got difficult, exactly as he probably did with all his clients when his dirty tactics were exposed. The judge then turned to Amanda, and her voice was cold as Arctic ice. She said, Mrs. Harrison, rarely do I see such a clear case of bad faith and attempt to defraud the court. You entered this marriage with fraudulent intentions, documented not only by your history of multiple profitable marriages and divorces, but also by your own words captured on recording. You and your lawyer actively conspired to extort Mr. Harrison using false threats and fabricated allegations. This is not a legitimate divorce. This is an attempted theft. Therefore, my decision is as follows. Your request for any division of property is denied in its entirety. You will receive none of the properties, no financial compensation beyond what is required by law for a marriage of this short duration, which in this case, given the circumstances, will be $0. Furthermore, you will be responsible for all of Mr. Harrison's legal costs, including attorney fees, which I imagine are substantial. And finally, I am forwarding this case to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible fraud and extortion. Amanda was in complete shock. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish out of water. She finally managed to say, Your Honor, please, I cannot pay his legal costs. I have no money. The judge replied without a shred of sympathy. Then, perhaps, you should have thought about that before trying to defraud a court of justice. You can sell some of the properties that you extorted from your previous husbands. The case is closed. The divorce will be granted to Mr. Harrison under the terms he originally proposed. She banged the gavel, and the sound echoed through the room like a shot. I watched Amanda stand up slowly, her face now red with humiliation and anger. She looked at me with a hatred so pure that I almost recoiled. But then she simply turned and left the room, her high heels clicking on the marble floor, each step a reminder of how much she had lost. Thomas gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "Well, that was even better than I expected. Let us get out of here and celebrate with a decent coffee." 3 months later, I received notification that the district attorney's office had decided not to prosecute Amanda criminally, but Rick Castellano was facing a 2-year suspension from the Bar Association for unethical conduct. Amanda had moved back to Los Angeles, where apparently she was trying to rebuild her life once again. I learned through a mutual friend that she was working as an event manager at a hotel, a real job this time, although it paid a fraction of what she was used to extracting from her ex-husbands. The legal costs she owed me, about $85,000, were deducted from the forced sale of the bungalow she had received from her second husband. Poetic justice, indeed. I returned to my normal routine, waking up early to walk in the desert while the sun painted the mountains in shades of pink and orange, working with a few select clients who still sought me out even after my semi-retirement, and spending weekends at my Flagstaff house, fishing for trout in cold and crystal-clear streams. Michael and Jennifer came to dinner one September evening. We sat on the patio while the sun set, turning the sky into a spectacle of reds and purples. Jennifer raised her glass of wine and said, "Dad, I have to admit, when you showed us those recordings before court, I was impressed. You really played chess while she was playing checkers." Michael agreed. The part I liked most was when her lawyer simply abandoned her in the courtroom. You could see the panic on her face. I took a sip of my bourbon and said, "You know, the funny thing is that I really liked her in the beginning, or at least I liked the version of her that she showed me. When I discovered the truth, I did not feel anger. Just a kind of sadness that she chose to live this way, hunting from relationship to relationship, never building anything real. It must be a very lonely existence." Jennifer touched my hand and said, "You are a better person than I am, Dad. I would have wanted her to be arrested. Sometimes, when I'm alone in Flagstaff, sitting on the wooden porch that I built myself 15 years ago, watching deer grazing in the nearby meadow, I think about how people make choices. Amanda chose the easy path, or what she thought was the easy path. Marrying successful men, extracting as much money as possible, and moving on. But, in the end, what does she have to show? Properties she did not earn, money she did not win, and a ruined reputation that will haunt her wherever she goes. I, on the other hand, spent 30 years building something real, a company that helped hundreds of people achieve financial stability, a 28-year relationship with Karen that, although it ended, left 2 wonderful children and genuine memories. And now, at 62 years old, I have the freedom to live exactly how I want, surrounded by landscapes that bring me peace, doing work that still challenges me, and maintaining relationships that are built on honesty instead of manipulation. There is no price that can be placed on that. There is no property that can replace that. The lesson I learned, and it is one that I share with my children and with anyone who asks, is that you cannot build a real life on fake foundations. Amanda tried to build wealth through deceit and manipulation, but fake foundations always crumble eventually. It may take time. It may require patience, but the truth always finds a way to emerge. In my case, the truth came in the form of a small digital recorder and 3 months of meticulous documentation. In the courtroom, when those recordings played and her plan was exposed, I saw not only defeat in Amanda's eyes, but something deeper. Shame. Because for the first time, perhaps in her entire life, she was forced to confront exactly who she had become, not a victim, not a wronged woman, but a fraudster whose tactics finally failed. And Judge Brennan laughed, not with cruel joy, but the kind of laughter that comes when something absurdly obvious is finally recognized. 3 houses. She really thought she would get 3 houses simply for existing in my space for 18 months. The audacity was almost admirable, if it were not so pathetic. Today, my life is simple and complete. I wake up with the sun, brew strong coffee in a French press that I bought in Seattle a decade ago, and spend the mornings reading or working on my 1967 Mustang that I've been restoring for 3 years. The car is metallic blue, the engine roars as it should, and every part that I replace or clean is a meditation on patience and precision. Just like the divorce case, restoring a classic car requires attention to detail, willingness to do the tedious prep work, and the understanding that shortcuts always charge their price later. Amanda took all the shortcuts. She paid the price. I did the work. I kept what I built. And when I sit behind the wheel of that Mustang, feeling the leather under my hands and hearing the engine wake up, I feel a satisfaction that no amount of stolen properties or extorted settlements could ever provide. It is the satisfaction of knowing that every single thing I have was earned honestly, and that when someone tried to take that from me through lies and manipulation, I was prepared. I had the tools. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And in the end, in a courtroom in Phoenix under the fluorescent lights and the freezing air conditioning, the truth was more than enough.